right, guys, welcome to part 86 of my overview of the Bible story. Thank you so much for joining me in another episode today, guys. This episode might be a little long, so get some snacks, because we are talking about the future of Israel. The future of Israel. This is a very interesting and exciting topic to explore, and that's what I want to do today, guys. I just want to kind of explore this, not really give you my own views, although I will do that, but there are a lot of different opinions about this, actually, among Christians. So right now in this story, in my overview of the Bible story, we are at the period of the church, right? There's this new group of people that are called Christians, and the Spirit of Yahweh is in this group of people. The Spirit of Yahweh is in His church, okay? So now Yahweh is with His church, His group of people who love Jesus, who've put their faith in Jesus, whose sins have been forgiven because of the blood of Jesus. So what about the future of Israel? Guys, what is Israel? Like, remember way back earlier in this series, God took a guy named Jacob and he changed his name to Israel. And that guy had 12 sons who became the 12 tribes of Israel. So is Israel a group of people or is it a country? Well, when we get to the time of Jesus, right, it's clear that Jesus got rejected by most of his people, right? Some did accept him. His people who were the Jews, like Yahweh's people were the Jews. Most of them rejected him. Some accepted him and they became the early church, Christians, right? Are we recording, guys? Yes, we are. Thank you so much for joining me. So, look what it says here in the Bible. He came to his own. It's talking about Jesus, okay? So, God came to his own people in the man Jesus, the Son of Yahweh. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. All right, so what an interesting statement. So, yeah, it's saying Jesus got rejected, guys. And remember what Jesus said when he was in Jerusalem? He said, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing." You were not willing. So who is not willing? Well, he's talking to Jerusalem. Is he talking to a city? Like, is he talking to the houses and the streets, the bricks, the stones? Or is he talking to the people? He says, how I long to gather your children. How can a city have children? It seems like he's talking about the people, right? And then he says this. He says, "Look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you that you will not see me again until you say, 'Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.'" Blessed is he. Who? He's talking about himself. Right? Blessed is me who comes in the name of the Lord. Right? Because Jesus came the first time. Remember, he came riding on the donkey down the Mount of Olives. He was the Messiah, the true King of Israel. He got rejected. So he's saying, you will not see me again until you say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Until. That means he's coming again, guys. Right? So, he's speaking to Jerusalem. He's clearly saying he got rejected there, right? I mean, we accept him, at least I do. Hope you do too. I hope you accept Jesus here. We accept him, but he's not talking about us. I already say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. I bless him all the time. Blessed be Yahweh. Blessed be Adonai. Blessed be Yeshua, my Messiah, my King, my Savior, my great high priest, my everything. He's all I have, guys. Every day I say to Jesus, Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good. There's no good in this world. There's no good in me. There's no good anywhere. He's it. He's my everything. It seems like the people who are going to say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, are going to be the people who rejected him, right? Or at least the city? Or is he talking about the Jews? These are important questions, guys. And the way you answer these questions kind of determines your understanding of what you think is going to happen next in the story. Okay, so, guys, the early church was only in Jerusalem, and it was made up of Jews who did accept Jesus. Right, so what's Jesus talking about here? He's saying, you, Jerusalem, you will not see me again. Well, the early church accepted Jesus, and they were only in Jerusalem. Right, remember that upper room where the early Christians were meeting, and they weren't even called Christians at that point. They only started getting called Christians years later in Antioch. Sorry, guys. Need to grab a swig of water here. So, if the Jews accepted Jesus in Jerusalem, well, what should we call the Jews who rejected him? Guys, what does God want us to call the Jews who rejected Jesus? What's your answer to this question? I mean, are we supposed to call them Jews? Are we supposed to use this distinction, like there were Jews who accepted Jesus, who became known as Christians in the church, right? What about the Christians what about the Jews who rejected him? Should we call them unbelieving Jews? Should we call them rebellious Israel? Should we call them not Jews at all? Or sons of Satan? Remember what Jesus actually said when he was talking to the Jews in John chapter 8? He said to the Jews, you belong to your father the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. Whoa, that is strong language. So, which Jews is he talking about here? Obviously he's talking to Jews who don't believe in him. He's not talking about his own followers. His own followers aren't sons of the devil. So is he, is it just the leaders of the Jews he's talking about here, or is it just unbelieving Jews in general? I don't know. You can read John chapter 8 for yourself and kind of try to figure out who is the audience here. It's actually right after Jesus saves the woman caught in adultery. Remember that woman? The leaders of the Jews, the Pharisees and stuff, they brought that woman caught in adultery. And then Jesus, he bent down and started writing, on the ground with his finger. Yeah, so we know that the leaders of the Jews were there at the temple. I think it seems like that when he's saying this. But what's, yeah, so is this just a small portion of the Jews that he's talking about here? Guys, are all unbelieving Jews lumped into a single category? Like from God's perspective now, like after, Jesus went up to heaven and the church started, at that point were all unbelieving Jews kind of the same, all lumped into one category? I'm not sure. And this is really the important question today, is from God's perspective, did the church replace Israel as his people? So if you just think back in this series, I mean, all the first 85 episodes in this long series, guys. Thank you very much for your patience, by the way. So in this long series, so we know that God his spirit is now with his people, the church. So, from God's perspective, did the church replace Israel? What's your answer to this? What do you kind of feel? Like, what's your gut feeling here? A lot of Christians, now Christians are very divided over this issue. They have very different answers. Many Christians believe the answer to this question is yes. Totally yes. Israel doesn't matter anymore. God's not even thinking about Israel. It's just his people, the church. But other Christians say, hang on a minute. Maybe we should think about this a little bit before we just jump into an answer. So that's what we're doing in this video, guys. We're kind of exploring this topic. Now remember, the persecuted church, right? That beginning of the church, they were persecuted by unbelieving Jews. By the high priest and stuff like that. Remember, they put Peter and John in jail after they healed the lame guy, and it was Herod Agrippa who killed James with the sword. I think that was in the last episode or 2 episodes ago that we took a look at that. They put Peter in jail, and then the angel came and miraculously rescued Peter out of jail. So we see that the unbelieving Gentiles are also persecuting the church. Okay, unbelieving Gentiles, like the Herod family, they weren't real Jews, guys. They weren't real proper Jews. They didn't follow the religion. Remember what it said. When Herod Agrippa saw that when they killed James with the sword, when Herod saw that pleased the Jews, that's why he captured Peter and put him in jail. So Herod Agrippa didn't even really, I don't know what they really considered. I don't know if he considered himself a Gentile or what, but we know that the Romans, the leaders of the Gentiles, the Roman Empire, they really persecuted the church, for a long time. But we know that Yahweh was with the persecuted church, right? This was Yahweh's project, okay? Yahweh wasn't with this group here, right? He wasn't with this group here. He was in the church who is made up of believing Jews and believing Gentiles, right? But you know what? The unbelieving Gentiles also persecuted unbelieving Jews. Okay? So the unbelieving Gentiles, the Romans, right? The Romans really also persecuted unbelieving Jews. So in 70 AD, they destroyed the temple. Okay, the temple, the temple, guys. That temple, the second temple, remember the first temple, Solomon? Who destroyed that? That got destroyed, by King Nebuchadnezzar's army. After he took a bunch of the people into exile, God kind of kicked his people out of his land, right? And so that was the first temple that got destroyed at that time. And then when they came back from exile, they rebuilt that temple under Zerubbabel's leadership. And then around the time of Jesus, King Herod, around the time Jesus was born, around that time, King Herod was making the temple better, doing improvements and stuff like that over many years. It took him many years to do that. But then ultimately that temple, Herod's renovated temple, the second temple, that got destroyed in 70 AD, guys. So that temple where Jesus was teaching and doing all that stuff, where Jesus made the whip, that you're turning my Father's house into a den of thieves. That temple got destroyed by the Romans. And so the Jews a lot of Jews were killed at that time. They were scattered. And then about 70 years after this, there was another kind of an uprising by the Jews against the Romans. And then they got killed again and scattered. I think that was kind of the last, I'm not sure. I can't remember the whole history during that period of time. But yeah, basically, guys, they were, I mean, there was no country at that point. They were just totally scattered and stuff like that. So in the first century after Israel rejected Jesus, it looks like God rejected Israel just totally, right? Like it looks like that anyway from the appearance. They lose their temple. They try to revolt. They just lose. They're slaughtered. They're scattered around everywhere, and they're just done. Now they're just a bunch of scattered people living among the Gentiles for a long period of time, guys. So from that time, 70 AD to 2025, when I'm making this video, no temple, guys. So that's why Judaism, the religion called like Judaism, it took on a very weird form because the temple was the center of the religion. How can you be a religion if you take the heart right out of it? Right? It's almost like taking the heart out of something and expecting the thing to stay alive. No, it wouldn't stay alive. It would just took on a really weird form. Like if you read this book, this is the Tanakh, right? This is the Old Testament. It's the Jewish Bible. Honestly, if you look at Judaism today, it doesn't look anything like this book describes. And the main reason for that is because they don't have a temple. Guys, so how can you have this religion? How can you have the religion of this book and not have a temple? So interesting, right? So what is Israel now? Like now in 2025? What is it? We know that Israel is actually a country now. It's a pretty modern country that it was established 77 years ago, guys. This is the flag of Israel, and it's turning 77 years old today. So happy birthday, Israel. Let's get some fireworks, guys. If I put 2 thumbs up, my software gives me some fireworks. So, guys, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to the Jews. Happy birthday, dear Jacob. Happy birthday to you. Let's get some balloons. If I go like this, my software gives me some balloons. Yeah, so happy birthday to the modern state. I call it a state. Sometimes people use the word state to refer to a country. So there's this country in Israel called I almost said there's a country in Israel called the Middle East. Got it backwards. There's a country in the Middle East called Israel. So what is this? So is this at all, does this fit into this story? So I've made 85 episodes so far in this long story of the Bible. Remember, this is a story of the Bible. It's not a story of all the world history, Chinese, or what happened over in Peru, or no. This is a story of the Bible, and that's right now we're getting toward the end of the Bible, right? But the Bible talks about the future, and so does this fit into the story of the Bible? Does modern day Israel fit into this? Well, I have this, but it's my next slide. Does modern Israel have anything to do with Yahweh's plan? Like I said, many Christians would say no, it doesn't. I talked to one a few months ago. No, he said, no, nothing. Modern country of Israel, it just happens to be there. Has nothing to do with God's plan. Right now, God's plan is the church, and when we can basically make everything better again in this world, then Jesus will come back and he will be king of the world, I guess. Or I disagreed with that guy. I disagreed very strongly with that guy. So I think my answer to this, guys, is, does modern Israel have anything to do with Yahweh's plan? My answer is yes, I believe so. And that's why these days are actually very exciting, guys. Just ask yourself this question. There's a tiny little country in the world called Israel today. Very small population. I think the population of Israel is maybe, is it maybe, I don't know, 16 million people or something like that, or even less? Maybe like 12 million or so. I can't remember what the population of Israel is, but it's small. It's way smaller than Canada, and Canada has a tiny population compared to many other countries in the world. So there's this tiny little piece of land. It's really not very, it's not very big at all, guys. I flew from Tel Aviv to Amman, Jordan, a couple years ago, and the plane took off. We took off going, toward the Mediterranean. We flew over the Mediterranean, then we turned around, and then we went over to Amman. And the plane was flying low, guys. We were flying super low because it doesn't have enough time to get high. It's just right there. It's literally like, I don't know, it's like less than 100 kilometers as the crow flies, as the plane flies, right? But the plane, we took off going the wrong direction. So we went around and, landed there. We were flying at, I don't even know. It seemed like it was really low, maybe like 8,000 feet or something above the ground or something. So so I think modern Israel does have a plan. That's what I want to explore in this video. Okay, so there's a new word I want to introduce in this series. It's called, the word is eschatology. Eschatology is the study of end times. Okay? It's a study of the end times. It's like, what's your eschatology? Means what's your view on the end times? So when we talk about Israel, this word comes up a lot, eschatology, or vice versa. When we talk about eschatology, the word Israel comes up a lot, at least among many circles of Christians. They talk about this all the time. So guys, I'm waiting for the eschaton. How about you? Are you waiting for the eschaton? This is a fancy word. I love this word. I like the sound of it. The eschaton. The eschaton means the end. The end. Just got a notification, guys, that my trackpad was connected. Have my filming this on an iMac. And it just notified me that, yes, my wireless trackpad is connected. But I already knew that. Weird, guys. Anyway. So, guys, in this series, I've been saying that Jesus will be king on Mount Zion. That's my view of eschatology. I think this story, where does it end? What does it look like when it ends? What is the end of this story, guys? What happens at the end? Do we all just go to hell? Do we all go to Mars? Do we all live on this earth? And it's just going to be the same old garbage all the time? With all these greedy politicians taking all our stuff forever? What is the end? This is the end in my eschatology. That's what I believe the Bible says. The reason I believe it is because it just says it. It says it very plainly. Jesus will be king on Mount Zion. Now, where is Mount Zion? In this series, I've been saying it's right here, guys. It's right here. Mount Zion. In the Bible, it's very clear that Jerusalem and Zion mean the same thing. It's the word Zion and the word Jerusalem are always used together, side by side. And particularly, I think Mount Zion could refer to the whole city of Jerusalem, but particularly, I think it refers to this hill where both temples stood. I believe both temples stood here. Now, some people have the belief that both temples were a couple of 100 meters south of here. If you think about maybe 2 or 3 soccer fields, south of here, this way. I think they were up here, guys. That's my belief. That's what most people believe. And in my, I keep talking about this book in the series, this archaeology book, Where God Came Down. It's a great book. That's also where this archaeologist says the temple was. So I don't know. But, so this is Mount Zion, guys. Zion and Jerusalem mean the same things. We don't need to get that confused because the Bible explains what Zion means. Here's just an example. There's hundreds of verses probably in the Bible about where it uses both the word Zion and Jerusalem back to back. So this is in Isaiah chapter 62. I love Isaiah chapter 62. All the chapters right at the end of Isaiah, so great. They're all mostly about Zion, guys. So look at this. Yahweh is speaking here. So for Zion's sake, I will not keep silent. For Jerusalem's sake, I will not remain quiet, till her vindication shines out like the dawn, her salvation like a blazing torch. Okay, so the way Hebrew poetry works, guys, is you say the same thing twice using different words, just to kind of emphasize the point. So here's the first one. For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent. It says the same thing again using different words. For Jerusalem's sake, I will not remain quiet. Why? So why will Yahweh not remain silent or quiet? It's till her vindication shines out like the dawn, her salvation like a blazing torch. Okay, so Yahweh is very interested in the vindication of Zion, guys. Zion means Jerusalem. Look at this. Right there. Need a little more swig of water, guys. So, what do you think Zion means? Because I want to just talk a little bit about this. I've started reading this Bible. It's called the Orthodox Study Bible, guys. The Orthodox Christians, they are primarily in Eastern Europe. Okay, so, I've been to Eastern Europe, so I visited a bunch of Orthodox churches. I remember I went to an Orthodox church in Sofia, Bulgaria. Man, that was amazing. Amazing choir, guys. The choir was like hidden up and behind. I couldn't even see who was singing. It was so pure. The voice, I couldn't tell if it was like 4 people singing or 40 people singing. That's how amazing it was. Just beautiful. So some of those Orthodox churches are just incredible, guys. Anyway, so Orthodox, there are Orthodox Christians all around the world, but a lot of them are in Eastern Europe. So I started reading this Bible. I bought it on Amazon. I'm not an Orthodox Christian. I'm not a Catholic. I'm most familiar with Protestant beliefs. But I want to explore. I'm always kind of interested in exploring other people's views because I just want to know the truth, right? And sometimes, to get to the truth, you kind of have to hear different opinions and different perspectives. So anyway, I was reading this a couple of days ago, and Psalm 2 might be one of my favorite Psalms. It says, I've quoted from that Psalm a lot in this series. Remember what Yahweh says? Yahweh says, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. And then we find out the king is his son. But so a study Bible, I should just mention, what is a study Bible? Here, this is called the Orthodox Study Bible. What is a study Bible? A study Bible is a Bible where there's some notes. You see, usually at the bottom of the page, there will be some explanation about maybe what a verse means or something like that. I don't know. So yeah, anytime you see a Bible that's called a study Bible, it's going to have someone's opinion, someone's notes or whatever about something. So this is a study Bible. Most of the Bibles I have are actually some might probably about half and half. About half the Bibles I have are just the plain text. So, Bibles like this guy, it's not a study Bible, it's just all Bible. Just all Bible. But this one, you can see, whoops, just put the Bible on my keyboard, guys. Sorry about that. You can see here, for example, like all that stuff at the bottom of the page, that stuff there at the bottom, that's all notes, guys. Notes. So you've got some Bible, about half the page is Bible, about the bottom half is notes. So I just want to read you. I was reading the notes under Psalm 2. And look what it says here, okay? So it says, Jesus is king without beginning and without end, and he is king over his holy hill of Zion, which is the church. And when I read that, I was like, Jesus is king of Zion, which is the church? Guys, does Zion mean the church? Well, according to this, it does. So, I was a little bit confused. And I'll be honest, I was pretty disappointed when I read that. Zion is the church? Since when? How did Zion become the church? Guys, the way you interpret the Bible totally controls your understanding of this story. Like, I guarantee you, the people who wrote those notes under the study Bible, like, they have a completely different eschatology than I do. Their idea is very different, guys. And remember a few weeks ago I asked you this question. Is this story just going to grow wings and just fly away? Is this story going to just kind of turn into a religion and just kind of fly way up to heaven and it's just done? The story's going to get totally disconnected from reality. Totally disconnected from the meaning of these words. Like, is the word Zion suddenly going to change from Jerusalem to the church? Like, what do you think? If so, when did that happen? And how did that happen? Because throughout the Old Testament, it's very clear that Zion means Jerusalem. It's always talking about Jerusalem. Like that, one of my favorite passages that I've quoted many times in Isaiah chapter 25, where Yahweh says, on this mountain, Mount Zion, right, I will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats, and the finest of wines. I can't wait, guys. So, yeah, like, the story, if we start changing words like this, where Zion's suddenly going to become the church, that means, like, this story is pretty much going to fly away, right? Fly up to heaven and become some weird religion. So, guys, I think many Christians have made this story into a weird religion. It's flown away, it's grown wings, it's gone. It's gone. So, there's three main branches of Christianity, guys. There's Catholics, Orthodox, and Protestants. So I'm most familiar with Protestants. This is kind of what I grew up with. This is kind of what I am familiar with. But these days I'm making an effort to learn more about these because I'm interested. For example, I listen to music on YouTube from these groups all the time. I love the choir music. I love their I love, like, Orthodox, kind of their style of singing, which is kind of like chanting, kind of a mournful chanting. I really like that, actually. I like Catholic music all the time, guys. I listen to this stuff. And I think I agree with a lot of their views on a lot of things. It's just there's some views that I have that I really don't like. I just gave you one example, like Zion meaning the church. Did Jesus say anything about that, guys? Did Jesus say, hey guys, now I'm in Zion. I want to explain to you that Zion isn't going to mean the city anymore. It's going to mean the church. Surprise, guys. It's now the church. Anytime we talk about Zion, we mean the church. Jesus never said that. Jesus told Jerusalem, you won't see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. To me, that has an obvious meaning. That means, just like Jesus physically came to Jerusalem, when he lived 2,000 years ago, he's going to come physically again. So I would say this, each of these groups is guilty of just turning this Yahweh's amazing story into a religion, just flying away, guys. And one of the things I think they get wrong is Israel. So most Catholics and most Orthodox, they really don't like the current state of Israel, guys. They're like against it. They're against the modern country of Israel. The only Christians who do support Israel, the modern state of Israel, are some Protestants. Actually, a good chunk of the Protestant Christianity supports Israel. Now, there are some Catholics, some Orthodox. In fact, one guy online that I watch every week, I watch a video of his. He was a Catholic, but he actually got kicked out of his church, basically, because of his views in support for Israel. So this topic is a very contentious issue, and your view on this is going to be determined probably by how you read the Bible. Most people don't read the Bible, so your view on it probably doesn't come from the Bible. It comes from whatever people tell you to believe, right? So, it's astonishing that such a small country, the modern state of Israel, commands so much attention in the world. Like that, how is it possible that a tiny little country, just a few, this is what I lost my train of thought before when I was talking about the flight that went over Israel. Israel's a tiny country, guys. It just takes a few minutes to fly over Israel. It's maybe, 50 kilometers wide, maybe just a couple 100 kilometers long. So it's a very tiny place. And yet this country is always in the news. Okay, so wow, isn't that interesting? Tiny population, tiny piece of land, and yet it's almost every day it's on world news. So guys, to answer this question, if we want to dig into finding the answer for the future of Israel, or talking about the modern state of Israel, if it's part of Yahweh's plan or not, where should we go for answers? What's the best, who would be the best person to consult about this? Well, I think it would be Paul. All right, Paul, he wrote many of the books in the New Testament, right? Now, remember, guys, Paul was a serious Jew. He described himself as the Pharisee of Pharisees. He was very zealous for his people, for the Torah, for, having a very pure religion, and so he was the main person who was persecuting the church. And then he became the most famous Christian missionary in history. So let's see what he says, because he knows about a lot about the Jews and a lot about Christians, right? He knows a lot about Israel and he knows a lot about Christianity. So he's a great guy to can you guys read that? Or is my screen cutting it off? Hope you can read it there. It's almost getting cut off on my screen. But so this is what Paul says in Romans chapter 11, okay, in his letter to Rome, the church in Rome, the book of Romans. So he says, I ask then, has God rejected his own people, the nation of Israel? Of course not. I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, and a member of the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, well, wow. What a way to start the chapter, right? He says, has God rejected his own people, the nation of Israel? Of course not. Oh, so Paul is writing this, right? Many years after Jesus. So Jesus went up to heaven. Now what? Now is Israel just done? And now we're just talking about the church forever? No, he says, of course not. God has not forgotten. He's not rejected his own people. So he says, no, God has not rejected his own people whom he chose from the very beginning. Do you realize what the scriptures say about this? Elijah the prophet complained to God about the people of Israel and said, Lord, they have killed your prophets and torn down your altars. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Remember evil king at that time, at the time of the prophet Elijah, King Ahab, and his evil wife Jezebel. Oh man, they were trying to kill Elijah, and he felt like he was the only guy left. Israel had totally rejected Yahweh, and Judah, the southern kingdom of Judah, totally rejected. They were just, Judah had some good kings. Israel, all the kings were bad in Israel. So, Elijah felt like he was the only one left. And this is what it says then. So it says, and do you remember, so Paul is writing, right? And do you remember God's reply? He said, no, right? You're not the only one left, Elijah. I have 7,000 others who have never bowed down to Baal. Oh, wow. It is the same today. For a few of the people of Israel have remained faithful because of God's grace, his undeserved kindness in choosing them. And since it is through God's kindness, then it is not only, it's not by their good works. So because it's through God's kindness, then it's not by their good works. For in that case, God's grace would not be what it really is, free and undeserved. Guys, God's grace is always free and undeserved. You can't really work to get God's grace. God's grace is this. It's not through works. We can't get God's grace by working for it, because then it's not grace, right? Then it's something you earned, right? So this is the situation. Most of the people of Israel have not found the favor of God they are looking for so earnestly. Interesting. Okay, I'll just read that again. So this is the situation. Most of the people of Israel have not found the favor of God they are looking for so earnestly. A few have, the ones God has chosen. But the hearts of the rest were hardened. As the scriptures say, God has put them into a deep sleep. To this day he has shut their eyes so they do not see, and closed their ears so they do not hear. Interesting. So it seems like Paul is saying God is the one who has put Israel to sleep, who has shut their eyes, right? Then he says this, did God's people stumble and fall beyond recovery? Of course not. They were disobedient, so God made salvation available to the Gentiles. Oh, they were disobedient, so God made salvation available to the Gentiles. And that's what we see at this point in the story. Part 85, 86, right? We're seeing that God's grace is, the church is mostly made up of Gentiles at this point, right? So the Gentiles are coming into the kingdom of God, but he wanted his own people to become jealous and claim it for themselves. Now, if the Gentiles were enriched because the people of Israel turned down God's offer of salvation, think how much greater a blessing the world will share when they finally accept it. Man, guys, this is kind of thick stuff here to understand. Right now, if the Gentiles were enriched because the people of Israel turned down God's offer of salvation, right? They rejected Jesus. Gentiles benefited from it, right? So then it says, think how much greater a blessing the world will share when they finally accept it. So they finally accept it. Paul is saying Israel will finally accept it. Even though now they're rejecting it, God has blinded their eyes, so they can't accept it right now. So I'm saying all this especially for you Gentiles. God has appointed me as the apostle to the Gentiles. I stress this, for I want somehow to make the people of Israel jealous of what you Gentiles have, so I might save some of them. For since their rejection meant that God offered salvation to the rest of the world, their acceptance will be even more wonderful. It will be life for those who were dead. And since Abraham and the other patriarchs were holy, their descendants will also be holy, just as the entire batch of dough is holy, because the portion given as an offering is holy. Does that make sense? Just as the entire batch of dough is holy, because the portion given as an offering is holy. Interesting. For if the roots of the tree are holy, the branches will be too. If the roots of the tree are holy, the branches will be holy. But some of these branches from Abraham's tree, some of the people of Israel, have been broken off. And you Gentiles, who were branches from a wild olive tree, have been grafted in. So now you also receive the blessing God has promised Abraham and his children, sharing in the rich nourishment from the root of God's special olive tree. But you must not brag about being grafted in to replace the branches that were broken off. You are just a branch, not the root. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting picture Paul is painting here, right? So we got the roots of a tree. We got a tree. Some of the branches were broken off. Some of the people of Israel have been broken off. And the Gentiles, and we were branches from a wild olive tree, we have been grafted into, the tree from Abraham's tree. Interesting. It's saying the Gentiles can't brag about this. I mean, yeah, the Jews, some of the Jews, the people of Israel, they were broken off so that we Gentiles could be grafted in. So we can't brag about it because it's not really our tree, right? We're kind of just grafted into the tree. Interesting. So what is he going to say next? Well, you may say, those branches were broken off to make room for me. Yes, but remember, those branches were broken off because they didn't believe in Christ. And you are there because you do believe. So don't think highly of yourself, but fear what could happen. For if God did not spare the original branches, he won't spare you either. Wow, interesting. Remember what Jesus said about remaining in the vine. A branch needs to remain in the vine, right? If you think about a grapevine, a branch needs to be in the vine in order to bear fruit. We need to remain in the vine, and that means we're connected to his spirit. We're connected to him by his spirit, right? So it's very important to remain in there. Remember what they did. They rejected Jesus, and Jesus said, I am the vine. So the Jews rejected Jesus. The ones who rejected Jesus rejected the vine, and so they were broken off, and that we were grafted in. At least that's what it seems like it's saying. So notice how God is both kind and severe. He is severe toward those who disobeyed, but kind to you if you continue to trust in his kindness. But if you stop trusting, you also will be cut off. Wow. If we stop trusting in Jesus, we're going to be cut off? Yeah, it looks like that. And if the people of Israel turn from their unbelief, they will be grafted in again. For God has the power to graft them back into the tree. You by nature were a branch cut off from a wild olive tree. So if God was willing to do something contrary to nature by grafting you into the cultivated tree, into his cultivated tree, he will be far more eager to graft the original branches back into the tree where they belong. So that seems like so God broke off the branches. It seems like God could graft them back into the tree. So what are we talking about? The people? The same people, or like new generations of people? Like the people that rejected Jesus, that generation, is that what Paul is talking about? Where that generation was broken off, but a future generation will be grafted back in? Or what? It's kind of a, deep topic, right? So I want you to understand this mystery, dear brothers and sisters, so that you will not feel proud about yourselves. Some of the people of Israel have hard hearts, but this will last only until the full number of Gentiles comes to Christ. And so all Israel will be saved. As the scriptures say, the one who rescues will come from Jerusalem, and he will turn Israel away from ungodliness. And this is my covenant with them, that I will take away their sins. Interesting, guys. Look at that, guys. Some of the people of Israel have hard hearts, but this will last only until the full number of Gentiles comes to Christ. So it seems like when the fullness, whatever the number that is, when the house, right, gets full, the people, the Gentiles, when that number is complete, then it seems like Israel's heart will be softened toward their Messiah, who is Jesus, and then all Israel will be saved. It seems like it's saying that, right? And then he quotes from the script. Paul quotes from the scriptures. The one who rescues will come from Jerusalem. So guys, this is Zion, Jerusalem. The one who rescues will come from Jerusalem. I wonder what the Orthodox people think about that. Because if Jerusalem is a church, well, will the rescuer come from the church? I see this as talking about the physical city of Jerusalem. The one who brings salvation, he's going to come from Zion. Remember what it says in Psalm 110? That Jesus will reign in the midst of his enemies. He says, you will rule in the midst of your enemies. And God will extend the scepter. Whose scepter? The scepter of Adonai. Right? The way the psalm starts is, Yahweh said to my Adonai, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. So that Adonai will reign from Jerusalem in the midst of his enemies, and God will extend his scepter, extend his rule from Jerusalem. That's the way I read that psalm. So yeah, the one who rescues will come from Jerusalem. He will turn Israel away from ungodliness. So it seems like a physical country of Israel, or at least the people of Israel there in the land, they're going to exist at that time. And he says, I will take away their sins. Did I just read this? Oh yeah, same slide, guys. Sorry, forgot I got a duplicate slide there. So, guys, Paul is finding the answer to this question in the Old Testament. Notice that he's looking at the Old Testament and he's thinking through this, right? And I think after Paul became a Christian, after he met Jesus on the road to Damascus, he really went back to the Old Testament and was like, man. And remember, the Old Testament was all they had then. He just had the Old Testament. None of the New Testament had been written at that point. I mean, there were probably notes like the early Christians, like Matthew and all the, like John and the disciples and stuff. They were starting to write stuff, but at that point there wasn't like this book that we have called the New Testament compiled yet. And so, Paul probably was just like, man, okay, what is the answer here? If Yahweh's plan was for the church, then what happens to Israel? That's why he's talking about these things. That's why he's exploring this topic. So Paul is going back to the Old Testament. So guys, we also need to go back to the Old Testament if we want to find answers on things. We can't just forget about the Old Testament. Some Christians do that. Some Christians only read the New Testament. In fact, I was watching a video of Orthodox just a few days ago on YouTube, and it was talking about some famous Orthodox Christian in history. I can't remember who it was, but this saint, I think they called him a saint. Apparently, he read through the whole New Testament every week. He would read through, I think, each gospel. Right, there are 4 gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I think it would be like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Each day he'd read through a gospel. And then he'd read through, the works of Paul, letters of Paul the next day maybe, and then guess the book of Revelation, or I don't know how he did. He read through the whole New Testament every week. And I remember thinking when I watched that a few days ago, man, if he read through the New Testament every week, he wouldn't have much time to read in the Old Testament at all. Like, guys, for me, I try to kind of have a balanced approach to this story. Now, obviously, in this series, I've made a lot of videos, over half the videos in this series, just about the life of Jesus. All right, because Jesus really is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. But it doesn't mean we can get rid of the Old Testament, right? All the things that happened in the story so far. Like, if we want to know the future of Israel, Paul is going to the Old Testament. So, we have to too, right? If you got a whole series of episodes in a show, well, they're all important, especially if you want to predict what's going to happen in the future. You need to watch the whole series, right? And so, I read the Old Testament a lot. In fact, when I fall asleep at night, it's almost always in the Old Testament. I rarely start listening to anything in the New Testament. But in my reading, I do a lot of reading, like in my daily reading and stuff. A lot of that is in the New Testament. But for some reason, when I listen to the Bible at night, it's always in the Old Testament, guys. So I have spent a lot more time in the Old Testament than I have in the New Testament in my life. So especially in the books of the prophets, that's usually what I listen to. So yeah, just remember this. Paul is going back to the Old Testament. Now, guys, I would say if Yahweh loves something in the Old Testament, we better think twice before messing around with it in the New Testament. Okay, if Yahweh loves something in the Old Testament, we better think twice before reinterpreting it to mean something else in the New Testament period. So for Zion, for example, the word Zion, which means Jerusalem, look at this verse in Psalm 78. It says he chose the tribe of Judah. It's talking about Yahweh. Yahweh chose the tribe of Judah, Mount Zion, which he loved. So Yahweh loves Mount Zion. So, if Yahweh loves Mount Zion, which at the time of this psalm meant Jerusalem, meant that hill, the hill where like Abraham, remember, brought, his son Isaac to obey Yahweh, to, sacrifice his son Isaac. Remember? And then God provided a ram that was caught in the bushes. Remember that hill? That's where the angel of the Lord came down. Remember, that was the threshing floor of Araunah. And David looked up and he saw the angel with a sword drawn, ready to destroy the city of Jerusalem. But then he went on up to that hill. He bought the hill. He bought that place, the threshing floor, from Araunah. And that's Mount Zion, guys, in Jerusalem to this day. So much in the story happened there. He loves that hill. Yahweh loves that. So we need to be really careful if we're just going to suddenly say, oh, well, Zion means the church. I don't think that's a good idea, guys. I don't think it's a good idea to reinterpret something Yahweh loves. Okay? That's my opinion. Look at this verse in Psalm 132. For Yahweh has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his home. This is my resting place forever and ever, and here I will dwell, for I have desired this home. So Yahweh has chosen Zion as a physical location. But the people, obviously, who wrote the Orthodox notes under the Bible, they're making Zion non-physical. They're saying it refers to the church. I just think we have to be careful if we're going to start reinterpreting words or kind of expanding the meaning of words. Yeah, sometimes I think we should do that. Sometimes we need to do that. But we need to be careful if we're going to do that. And that's one of the hard things about reading the whole Bible is like what things were meant to be taken literally and what things are kind of more symbolic or metaphorical. So was the whole story so far about Jerusalem, was that just kind of a symbol of what Yahweh was planning to do with the church? I don't think so, guys. That's my view. So let's keep reading in Romans chapter 11, what Paul is saying. Okay, so many of the people of Israel are now enemies of the good news, and this benefits you Gentiles. Yet they are still the people he loves because he chose their ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Whoa, look at this, guys. Yet they are still the people he loves because he chose their ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Does Yahweh still love the physical descendants of Abraham? Yeah, many of the people of Israel are now enemies. Yeah, they're enemies of the good news. And Paul is saying this benefits you. I'm a Gentile. Are you a Gentile? It benefits us. Yet they are still the people he loves because he chose their ancestors. Man. So for God's gifts and his call can never be withdrawn. Once you Gentiles were rebels against God, but when the people of Israel rebelled against him, God was merciful to you instead. Now they are the rebels, and God's mercy has come to you so that they too will share in God's mercy. For God has imprisoned everyone in disobedience so he could have mercy on everyone. Wow, what an interesting phrase. God has imprisoned everyone in disobedience so he could have mercy on everyone. Guys, honestly, don't get the idea that I know everything about this story. Don't think I'm a Bible scholar. I'm not. I think about the Bible every day. Every day I try to understand the story, but there's a lot that I don't understand. A lot of verses I read are just kind of like a mystery to me. What does this mean? And I'm trying to figure it out, right? That's why I said this episode is kind of a discussion of what is the future of Israel going to be? What does this really mean for this story? So guys, I want to ask you again, from God's perspective, did the church replace Israel? I mean, we know that God's Spirit, his plan, he's using the church, his message, his good news, his gospel is going out, right? And Paul just explained that the Jews, a lot of the Jews, are enemies of the good news. And that's actually good news for us Gentiles, that they're enemies, because it's like they're broken off. Now we are grafted into the tree. Are there limited spots in the tree? Or can more branches be added in, the branches that had been broken off? Or is this only one spot for a branch? If it gets broken off, then the new branch goes in. Can the old branch go in a different place in the tree? I'm not sure. But, like I said, a lot of Christians believe, like especially Orthodox and Catholic Christians, they would say, yes, the church has totally replaced Israel. At least most of them would say this. Yeah, it's, this whole idea of Israel and the Jews, they're not God's people anymore. And it's unfortunate that many Christians have had very angry views, or they've persecuted the Jews, actually. So, in the story that we've been talking about, it's always the unbelieving Jews who were persecuting the Christians. But in the few hundred years after that, it seems like things were turned around, where the Christians got power and the Christians started persecuting the Jews to kind of get back at them. You killed our Messiah. You killed our Jesus. We love Jesus. You were the ones who killed him, so we're going to persecute you. Yeah, guys. So if you read, I'm sure if you talk to Orthodox, Christians, like the people who wrote the study notes on this book. Now, I just started reading this. I plan to read this whole Bible, read all their study notes, because I want to understand their perspective on things, right? I actually bought a book, a Catholic book on Mary a few months ago, and I read that. I learned some things there. But, it's... I don't agree with the Catholic perspective on Mary, guys. But I've tried to understand it as best as I can. And I'm always trying to learn new things about what they believe about this. And I like to learn more about what the Orthodox believe about different things as well. So it's, in my current understanding of things, the Orthodox Christians and the Catholic Christians, most of them believe that the church has totally replaced Israel. God has kind of forgotten about Israel. There's really no future for Israel. Now it's all about the church. Guys, remember Gabriel, when Gabriel visited Mary? Gabriel said this: "You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end." Okay, so Jesus will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. What a phrase. What can this mean? He's telling Mary, Mary, you're going to have a son named Jesus. He's going to reign over Jacob's descendants forever. To me, that sounds like it has an obvious meaning, a very simple meaning. And guys, will Jesus reign over Jacob's physical descendants or his spiritual descendants, or both? Like at this point in the story, like when Gabriel appeared to Mary, were there spiritual descendants of Jacob? Well, we've known in the story that anybody can join Yahweh's family by faith, right? We've seen the different women who have joined the story, like, for example, Ruth, Rahab, Tamar, the different people who've joined the story. So, but when we talk about the people of Israel, well, they were physically descendants of Jacob, right? But I think it refers to both. And we know that Mary interpreted it this way. Mary interpreted Gabriel's words with the physical descent because she sings this beautiful song. I don't know if she wrote a beautiful song, it seems like, after this visitation. And this is one of the lines in the song. She says, "He has helped his servant Israel." Okay, she's talking about God. God has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, just as he promised our ancestors. Okay, so Mary is also going back to the Old Testament, all the promises that Yahweh has given to his people. A lot of promises. She's talking about Israel and Abraham forever, the ancestors. So, that's how she interpreted Gabriel's message. Mary had no idea about the church at this point. But she's happy. She's happy to hear that Yahweh has not forgotten about his people. She cared about this story, guys. Guys, many Christians think that God chose Mary because she was pure. Right? Oh, Mary was pure, sinless. In fact, Catholics believe Mary was totally sinless her whole life. And that's called the Immaculate Conception. So Mary was conceived without sin. I mean, all Christians believe that Jesus was sinless. Yeah. But Catholics believe Mary also was sinless. And that's what this means, Immaculate Conception. Now, Orthodox Christians do not believe in the Immaculate Conception. At least that's my understanding. They don't believe this. Also, Protestants don't believe this. But Catholics do believe this, that Mary was totally sinless. Guys, I don't, this is one of the things I don't believe personally. I don't believe in the Immaculate Conception. And unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why I would never be accepted in the Catholic Church. Because if you want to become a Catholic, you have to accept everything they teach about Mary. There's certain things you have to believe about Mary. You have to believe Mary was a virgin her whole life. The Orthodox also believe that Mary was a virgin her whole life. Protestants don't believe. Most Protestants don't believe that. But to become a Catholic, I would have to believe this: that Mary was sinless, that she was a virgin her whole life, and some other things about Mary. If I don't believe those things, they're gonna say, "You're out of here. Get out of our church. You don't belong here." But I'll be honest, I don't believe that she was. You know why I think why God chose Mary? I think Yahweh chose Mary because she cared, guys. Mary cared about the story of Yahweh. She cared very much. That's why when Gabriel gave her this amazing message, she didn't have to kind of think, what kind of song should I write here? It was a natural thing that flowed from her heart because she cared. Because when you care about something, you don't have to do a lot of studying about it or research or anything. Like in this series, right? I'm making this series because I care. I've done almost no research in this series. I just put together my slides really quick because I know the story. I care. I think God chose Mary because she cared about it. A young woman in Israel at that time, occupied by the Roman occupation, Roman rule over that area. Very rarely do people care, guys. It's rare that people care. And I think Yahweh just loves it when people care. I think God chose Abraham, guys, because he cared. I think Abraham was a man who cared. And we know this because remember when his nephew Lot, now we didn't really talk about this earlier in this series, but he had a nephew Lot. Lot got captured by an enemy army and was being taken up north. And Abraham heard about it. Abraham got together 318 of his men. They prepared themselves for battle, and they chased this army down, and they beat them, and they saved Lot. So this Uncle Abraham, saved his nephew Lot. Now, why would he do that? Because he cared. Have you ever heard of an uncle saving a nephew? I've never heard about that in my culture. Guys, in my culture, an uncle would say, my nephew is suffering. My nephew got captured. Okay, well, that's his problem. It has nothing to do with me. Why is that my responsibility? My nephew decided to go live in a bad city and he got captured. That's his problem. Sucks to be him. All right? That's, Abraham was totally different, guys. He cared a lot. He also cared very much who his son Isaac married. Okay, he made his servant Eliezer swear an oath. It's in the book of Genesis. You can read about it. He's like, you cannot let my son Isaac marry one of the women from around here. You have got to go back up to the area of up north where his brother's family had stayed up there earlier in the story. He said, you have got to get one of my relatives from up there to be a wife for my son Isaac. So, he cared, guys. He cared a lot. We can see that. I think God chooses people who care about his story, who care about others, who understand what's going on. So, Paul said, if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So if you and me have faith in Jesus, we are also Abraham's children, guys. And we are heirs according to the promise. So it's clear that we also belong to the family of Abraham if we have faith in Jesus. Okay? So Abraham's children is not just limited to physical descendants. It's by faith too. People can become descendants of Abraham, right? And inherit all the promises. So, Paul, we've already looked at this a couple episodes ago. I just want to read it again here. So Paul also says this, for Christ himself has brought peace to us. He united Jews and Gentiles into one people, when in his own body on the cross, he broke down the wall of hostility that separated us. He did this by ending the system of law with its commandments and regulations. He made peace between Jews and Gentiles by creating in himself one new people from the two groups. Together as one body, Christ reconciled both groups to God by means of his death on the cross, and our hostility toward each other was put to death. Okay? And then he says this, he brought this good news of peace to you Gentiles who were far away from him, and peace to the Jews who were near. Now all of us can come to the Father through the same Holy Spirit because of what Christ has done for us. So now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. You are citizens along with all of God's holy people. You are members of God's family. You're members of God's family. The reason I wanted to read this verse is because some Christians believe that God has forgotten about Israel, right? Though he doesn't care about it, he cares about the church. But there's a different group of Christians who believe that God only cares about Israel, basically, and the church is just a tiny little component. Doesn't care about us Christians much. Cares about Israel is his main focus, and Christians are just, we get the crumbs under the table, right? Actually, no. we're all part of God's family. If we're in Christ, we have equal status, guys. We're citizens. We're no longer strangers and foreigners. We're citizens. Okay? So really the Spirit of God, guys, the Holy Spirit, is with his people, the church. Okay? So right now, unbelieving Jews, people who don't believe in Jesus, both Jews and Gentiles, they do not belong to God's family. They don't have his Spirit. They're not connected to Yahweh. Look what John says, okay? The disciple, John, this is what he says in one of his letters. He says, anyone who denies the Son doesn't have the Father either. But anyone who acknowledges the Son has the Father also. Okay, that's clear, right? If you deny the Son, you deny the Father. You don't have Yahweh at all. Guys, so you cannot have Yahweh if you reject Jesus. There's no way. So for the people of Israel, let's say modern Israel, who rejects Jesus, they don't have Yahweh. But some Christians have this weird idea that they do. Oh, that God just is with his people. He loves his people. He just has a great relationship with the modern Jews in Israel. And then there's the Christians over here that we guys, that's not how it is. You can't have Yahweh if you reject Jesus. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. So the modern state of Israel can't get to Yahweh if they don't go through Jesus. They don't have Yahweh, guys. So since Israel rejects Jesus, they also reject Yahweh. That's clear. But the question is, will it be forever? That's the question. Many Christians believe that it is forever, that Yahweh has no plan for the redemption of Israel as a country or a people. It's just like he's completely forgot about it. But I believe it will not be forever. So my answer to this, will it be forever? No, it won't. But right now, the country of Israel, they reject Jesus. They also reject Yahweh. Okay? Remember what Jesus said in his last week before he died? Remember he saw that fig tree? He wanted some figs because he was hungry. He went up to the fig tree, but there was no fruit. So he said, may you never bear fruit again. He cursed the fig tree. And then the next day, Peter was like, hey, Jesus, look at that tree. That's the tree you cursed. It's all withered. It completely withered. It was like dead. So what a strong statement. May you never bear fruit again. And remember, a few episodes ago we talked about this. It seems like the fig tree, it's like a symbol of Israel. But in the same week, Jesus also said this to his disciples. He said, now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Interesting, okay? As soon as its twigs get tender and leaves come out, leaves, not fruit. He says, the leaves come out, that's when you know summer is near. So that withered fig tree that Jesus cursed, could that get? And he said, may you never bear fruit again. He didn't say, may you never grow leaves again. He said, may you never bear fruit again. So is it possible for that withered fig tree to grow leaves? And he said, that's how you know summer is near. And why is he saying this? It's because his disciples had asked him this question. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? What will be the sign of the end of the age, guys? The eschaton. The eschaton. When will the end the disciples were interested in that. I'm interested in that. Are you interested in that? In the eschaton, the end of the age. What will the signs be? And Jesus said, when you see the leaves on the fig tree coming out. Interesting. So, guys, I want to ask you this question. Could present-day Israel be the leaves on the fig tree that show us the eschaton is near? Could modern-day Israel's only 77 years old, could this Israel be the leaves on the fig tree? Because Israel is they don't believe that there's no fruit, right? There's no fruit, but the leaves are coming out. Could it show us that the eschaton is here? I think yes. I think it could be this, and it's interesting to think about. You guys, remember Ezekiel chapter 37? Remember when Yahweh took Ezekiel to a valley? He took him by the Spirit into a valley full of dry bones. And Yahweh told Ezekiel that the dry bones represent Israel. Okay, and then he asked Ezekiel, he said, "Son of man, can these bones live?" And Ezekiel said, "Only you know, Yahweh." And then Yahweh told Ezekiel, "Prophesy to these bones." So he starts to prophesy to these bones. He says this, "So I spoke this message just as he told me. Suddenly, as I spoke, there was a rattling noise all across the valley. The bones of each body came together and attached themselves as complete skeletons. Then, as I watched, muscles and flesh formed over the bones. Then skin formed to cover their bodies, but they still had no breath in them." Oh, look at that. They had no breath in them. Okay? So these people that God is saying are Israel, this valley of dry bones represents Israel. All of a sudden, all the bones are coming together and people are forming and muscles and skin and everything, but no breath, no spirit, no ruach. Remember the Hebrew word for breath and spirit is ruach. They had no spirit in them, guys. They were still dead, but they were physically brought together again. So look what else what else Yahweh says. He says, "I will gather the people of Israel from among the nations. I will bring them home to their own land from the places where they have been scattered. I will unify them into one nation on the mountains of Israel." Remember, guys, just before the exile, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, they were divided. The northern kingdom got kicked out up to those people up north. They had taken up into exile, and the kingdom of Judah was sent into exile to Babylon. Well, now Ezekiel, he was in Babylon, and Yahweh took Ezekiel by the Spirit to a valley somewhere and showed him this vision, right? And so, so he said, look at this. He says, "I will unify them into one nation." Okay, so it's not going to be a divided nation anymore. It's going to be one nation. "And one king will rule them all. No longer will they be divided into two nations or into two kingdoms. They will never again pollute themselves with their idols and vile images and rebellion. For I will save them from their sinful apostasy. I will cleanse them. Then they will truly be my people, and I will be their God." Hey, they will be my people, and I will be their God. Look, God is taking, he's saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to cleanse them. So guys, if Yahweh has a plan, if he's going to do something, nothing can stop that. So it seems to me like Yahweh's going to bring his people back into the land. But they might be dead when they get back into the land. I mean, they might be lifeless. He might gather the people into the land, and they might be lifeless for a period of time before he breathes his Spirit into them. So let's keep reading what Yahweh says. So Yahweh says, "My servant David will be their king, and they will have only one shepherd. They will obey my regulations and be careful to keep my decrees. They will live in the land I gave my servant Jacob, and the land where their ancestors lived. They and their children and their grandchildren after them will live there forever. Oh, notice that. Forever. Generation after generation. And my servant David will be their prince forever. And I will make a covenant of peace with them, an everlasting covenant. I will give them... Sorry, guys, I'm losing my voice again. Still recording. Yes, guys, thank you for sticking with me in this long video. We're almost done. So I'll try to read a bit faster. Okay. I will give them their land and increase their numbers, and I will put my temple among them forever. I will make my home among them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. And when my temple is among them forever, the nations will know that I am the Lord who makes Israel holy. Okay, so he's going to put his temple there, and he's going to live with them forever. And then the nations will know, right? Now, guys, who's his servant David? King David is going to be king of Israel? Does that make sense? Because I thought Jesus was going to be the king of Israel forever. I mean, that's what Yahweh's idea was, right? That a son from David would be the king, not David himself. I think in this case it does mean Jesus. I think Yahweh is using the name David here because he's speaking this message to the Jews knowing they will reject the name of Jesus temporarily. Okay, so the Jews, I mean, they're just totally fixated on David. David. I think, and in Ezekiel's experience with Yahweh, right, it's a message for the people of Israel. Like Ezekiel is supposed to go and tell the people of, like the Jews in exile, he's supposed to tell them, what Yahweh is saying to him, right? Because he's a messenger, he's a prophet. Right? He's supposed to give this message. So, that's my opinion. But yeah, it's kind of a mystery. Why is he saying David there? I think it means Jesus. It's just that Yahweh is kind of giving us a foreshadow that they're going to reject Jesus, and they're still going to be looking for David, and but it is actually the son of David. And there's no separation between father and son, right? So like David and Jesus, like if you call Jesus David, would he be offended by it? If you saw Jesus walking by and you said, "Hey, David," would Jesus be angry? No, he wouldn't. In fact, remember those blind guys running after Jesus, shouting, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on us," right? People called Jesus the son of David all the time. So if you called Jesus David, or the son of David, or the grandson of David, or the great-great-grandson of David, it's all the same. It's all the same thing, right? So guys, this is what I think. In Ezekiel chapter 37, we have lifeless Israel, right? Lifeless Israel who comes together, like the bodies are there together, skin, the muscles, everything's there, except they don't have the spirit in them. They don't have the breath, the life of God in them. So right now, Israel is 77 years old today. Since when they became a nation again. So, they weren't, from the time of Jesus, they weren't even a country at that point. The Romans, right? They, for a long time, even before Jesus, they weren't really a country, guys. And then finally, like thousands of years later, Israel becomes a country in the Middle East. And right now, since that time, they're 77 years old. Now, you'd think, like, if you just think about Yahweh's plan, does the current state of Israel, is this possibly the leaves on the fig tree with no fruit? That's showing us the end, because what Jesus said, how do we know we're getting near the eschaton? We know when the fig tree starts sprouting leaves. So here we go. Israel's 77 years old. And then after Ezekiel, so this is Ezekiel 37. In Ezekiel 40, I think we see chapter 40 to 48, we see God reigning over Israel, and that's, I think, going to be in the millennium. We talked about the last 1,000 years in God's week of millenniums, right? The last one is the millennium, the Sabbath millennium, where Jesus is going to reign from Jerusalem over Israel forever. One example of this is in chapter 43. I'll just read a verse from there. Yahweh says, "Son of man, this is the place of my throne, and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever." Yahweh's saying this. Remember, just like back in the Psalms. Yahweh said multiple times in the Psalms, "I've chosen Zion. This is my home. I've desired it. I love it. I want it. I'm going to fight for it. I'm going to redeem it. This is it." So, it's interesting that Yahweh's saying son of man here, because he's talking to Ezekiel. He's calling Ezekiel the son of man. Son of man, this is the place of my throne. He takes him to the temple on Mount Zion, right? And he says, "This is the place of my throne and the place for the soles of my feet." Does Yahweh have feet, guys? Yeah, Yahweh has feet. Jesus has feet. Guys, Jesus walked around all the time. So it's interesting that he's saying son of man, because actually Jesus is the son of man. Right? So it's like Ezekiel is kind of a symbol of Jesus here at the temple. I mean, it's all in the spirit. Yahweh is taking Ezekiel in the spirit to the future and showing him stuff. So he's showing him this temple. So in the last chapters of Ezekiel, it's all about this temple and about the land of Israel. It's very interesting 9 chapters, the last 9 chapters in the book of Ezekiel. But look at that. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever. I mean, how can you interpret this? If we say, Israel means the church. So this is where I'm going to live. I'm going to live in my church forever. Guys, I don't think it makes any sense. The best way to interpret the Bible is just to kind of get the plain meaning of it. Yeah, there's a lot of symbols in the Bible. There's a lot of metaphors, a lot of idioms, that type of stuff. But the basic meaning, I think, can be understood. And I think it's clear that Yahweh is going to live in Jerusalem. That's his holy city. He's going to make it new. And it's where he's going to reign over the descendants of Jacob forever, just like Gabriel. It wasn't Gabriel's own idea. It was Yahweh's message to Mary. This Son of God, the Son of the Most High, is going to reign over the Israelites forever from Jerusalem. And if you want to call that son of David, David himself, great. He'd probably like that. I'm not sure. So, what happens right before the millennium in these chapters? Well, just before, let's read what it says at the end of chapter 39, okay? Well, look at this. Yahweh's saying, "So now, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will end the captivity of my people. I will have mercy on all Israel." How much of Israel? All Israel. I will have mercy on all Israel, for I jealously guard my holy reputation. Guys, this is about God's holy name, his reputation. They will accept responsibility for their past shame and unfaithfulness after they come home to live in peace in their own land, with no one to bother them. Okay, look at this, guys. This is incredible. Who says they? Israel. The Israelites, they will accept responsibility for their past shame and unfaithfulness. Yeah, were the people of Israel, were they unfaithful to God? Yeah, this whole story they've been unfaithful. Even now in modern Israel, they've forgotten about Yahweh. They're blind. They will accept responsibility for their past shame and unfaithfulness. Wow. When I bring them home from the lands of their enemies, I will display my holiness among them for all the nations to see. Then my people will know that I am Yahweh their God, because I sent them away to exile and brought them home again. I will leave none of my people behind, and I will never again turn my face from them. For I will pour out my spirit upon the people of Israel. I, the sovereign Lord, have spoken. Look at that, guys. I will pour out my spirit upon the people of Israel. So in the valley of dry bones, when the bones come together and skin and flesh, and they look like people, but they don't have the spirit in them. Well, look what Yahweh's saying. I will pour out my spirit upon the people of Israel. And this happens this is at the end of chapter 39. And then chapter 40 is when the millennium starts. Now, the question is, okay, if in Ezekiel chapter 37 they're lifeless, and then in chapter 40 they have life, then what happens in between here, guys? Chapter 38 and 39 are about invasion. Israel gets invaded by armies from the north. It talks about an invasion of Israel. You can read very interesting chapters, Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. This video is already super long, so I won't read them. But it's so interesting because, guys, right now, today, does an invasion of Israel seem likely to happen? Yeah. Just look at the news, guys. Look at the news. What's Erdogan? Erdogan, whatever he's saying. Erdogan, the leader of Turkey. What's he saying? Does he want to invade Israel? Yeah, he does. And now he has his servant, who's the leader of Syria, the country of Syria, right? He has his own ally, his slave, is the leader of Syria in Damascus. Damascus, guys. Remember Damascus? What happened in Damascus? That evil Pharisee Saul was on his way to Damascus to crush the church. And then he got converted. Well, Damascus is not far from Israel. So Erdogan, their military, Turkey's military is in Syria as well. So they're both linked. They're both like two peas in a pod. Turkey and Syria now. They're very tight. Wow. So guys, things are playing out now. Does Erdogan and the leader of Syria, do they both want to invade Israel? Of course. Definitely. They both want it. And they talk about it, guys. Erdogan has talked about it many times. They want it. Why? Why does Erdogan want Jerusalem? Well, it's because the Ottoman Empire, they used to control Jerusalem. So now it's called Turkey, right? But not long ago, like 100 years ago, this area was the Ottoman Empire. They controlled this whole thing, guys. It's just like 100 years ago, not long ago, that they controlled Jerusalem. Now, was he alive at that time? No, he wasn't. But his parents were. I think his dad was a teenager when Turkey controlled Jerusalem. So guys, this stuff isn't like hundreds and thousands of years ago. This is recently. Okay? When his dad, I don't know, maybe his dad visited Jerusalem. I have no idea. I don't know his history. But it's possible that one of Erdogan's relatives was, maybe he went to Jerusalem. Maybe he had told stories to his son, Erdogan. Hey, I went to Jerusalem. I did this and that. And yeah, that was our city. That's an Ottoman city, a great city of the Ottoman Empire. Well, they lost it. If you lose something, guys, do you want to find it again? Do you want to get it back? Yeah, like if someone steals your car, You say, hey, I want my car back, right? So from Erdogan's perspective, they lost this area. They lost the territory. Well, how did they do that? Because they lost World War I. They allied themselves with Germany, right, in World War I, and they lost. So, this area was controlled by the British for a while, and, the rest is history. But does he want it back? Yeah, because he's probably heard stories from his relatives. His ancestors have told him, So the memories right there. We're talking one generation, guys. The difference between father and son. That's not a long time. So this whole area now wants this. They want it very badly. So why wouldn't they just go and take it? Do you think they're going to do it? Yeah, I think they're going to try. And I think it's going to be very soon. And it's interesting that Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39 are so specific. It's going to be from the north. It's going to come from the north, guys. So right there, now all this area is lining up, and it's for an invasion from the north. You just can't make this stuff up. Like, think about this, guys. Ezekiel was written 2,500 years ago. Ezekiel was about 500 years before Jesus. And now we're 2,000 years after Jesus. So about 2,500 years old. We have, books like Isaiah or Ezekiel or Jeremiah. We have these books that were written so long ago. And now the pieces are starting to come together like this. Like, even if I was like an atheist and I didn't believe this stuff, I would, like, if I didn't believe the Bible at all, I would start waking up. I would say, okay, well, this piece of writing that was written 2,500 years ago, all these pieces are coming together now in history, and the Bible explained all this stuff. I would start to wonder, maybe I should rethink my eschatology. I would definitely, guys. If you believe all this is just kind of weird stuff, you need to rethink your eschatology. The signs are pointing to something happening imminently. Remember what I said, guys. If Yahweh loves something, we better not mess around with it. So if Erdogan is watching my video, or that this guy of Syria, I don't know, the media calls him two names. I don't know what his real name is. But, if these guys are watching my video, I would strongly suggest don't do it. If you're thinking about invading Israel from any direction, my advice is don't do it. Why? Read those chapters. Read Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, and you will find out why it's not a good idea. Because Yahweh himself intervenes for his land. He sees this as his land. So, if you think that the Jews living in the land today are evil and they need punishing, you might have a case. But I would say leave it to Yahweh. Leave it to Yahweh to punish his people. He's done it before. Yahweh could kick out his people from the land. Yeah. So what I think what probably will happen is, because what we see is the invasion is going to be, I think, largely successful. For a while, temporarily, it's going to be pretty successful. Man, you guys, Turkey has a massive military. It's way bigger than Israel's. So Turkey plus Syria combined, the population, guys, is would be at least 10 times greater than the population of Israel. So, it's just, the military, it's way bigger. Israel has one advantage. They have a good air force. Okay, they have a good air force, and they have nukes. But that's basically, those are their two cards. And they have a good relationship with the US. If that relationship is if something happens to that relationship, guys, if they're on their own and Turkey and Syria smell weakness, We don't even talk about Syria. It's all controlled by Turkey. Erdogan, I think he runs the show for all of Turkey and Syria now. So if he decides that it's time to do an attack, if he smells weakness here, Pakistan has offered to give Turkey nukes anytime they want. So if Turkey wants to get nuclear weapons, they can get them from Pakistan. So yeah, like guys, everything is coming together, and wouldn't it be a good idea to just kind of wake up and look at this a little bit and just wonder, is this story true? Is Yahweh real? Is Jesus really coming back? Yeah, I think so. So guys, yeah, it's not a good idea to mess around with Israel because Yahweh loves Israel. It's very clear. Now, the current state of Israel, they don't have Yahweh in that sense because they don't have Jesus. But does Yahweh still love them? Does Yahweh still love his land and those people? Yeah, remember what Paul said in Romans chapter 11. They're still loved. They might get punished very quickly here, guys. So, yeah, I would say we need to be watching very closely for this, guys, this invasion of Israel. And I think a lot of the passages in the Bible talk about this period. It's just going to be a short period, I think. For example, in Zechariah chapter 14, it says this, I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured, the houses ransacked, and the women raped. Half of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. Then Yahweh will go out and fight against those nations, as he fights on a day of battle. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley, with half the mountain moving north and half the mountain moving south. Now remember, this mountain, the Mount of Olives, that's where Jesus went up to heaven from. And I can't remember if we read this, but anyway, there were some men appeared there, and angels said to the Christians who were watching, Jesus is going to come back the same way he left. So is Jesus going to come down? A lot of people believe that Jesus is going to come down on the Mount of Olives when he returns. I'm not sure. There's a bit of mystery around this stuff, guys. So he's going to fight. Jesus is going to fight. Can you just imagine Jesus fighting? What a terrifying thought. I wouldn't want to be Jesus' enemy, guys. But notice this. Half the city will go into exile. Isn't this interesting, guys? This was written like 2,500 years ago. The prophet Zechariah, 2,500 years ago. It says half. Well, the city of Jerusalem today, now, it's divided into two pieces. You got West Jerusalem and you got East Jerusalem. How would Zechariah know 2,500 years ago that the city would be divided? Well, Yahweh knew. Yahweh can see the future, guys. Yahweh's the one who's giving the prophets his messages, his instructions on what to say. Did Zechariah understand this? Probably not. Zechariah probably just got his pen out and maybe his scroll or whatever and starts writing this stuff down. But yeah, guys, so much is I think going to happen here, and it's possible that this could be very soon. Now, guys, I don't, this is all just kind of wondering. We're just wondering about this stuff. I don't know. I'm waiting for this stuff. You know what I find interesting? So Israel is 77 years old now, right? Since it became a country again. In Psalm 90 is a psalm of Moses, actually. And Moses says this, our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures. Okay. Moses is saying our days may come to 70 years or 80 maybe if our strength endures. Why is he saying this? Because Moses himself lived till 120 years. Moses died when he was 120 years old. So why would he say that our days, our years, may come to 80 years? If we have strength, we'll get to 80. Well, Moses got to 120. So what's going on here? This could be a prophecy about modern Israel. Where, he's saying our days, because Moses was an Israelite, right? So our days may come to 70, or if we have strength, 80. Now Israel's 77, guys. 77. So I'm expecting, I think, if you just look around, guys, what's happening in the world, so many things are converging to this moment. I think before Israel turns 80, we are going to see major things happen in the world. And I think this year, 2025, we're going to see major things happen. We're already, almost summertime now in 2025. I'm surprised bigger things haven't happened yet, but I'm thinking the second half of 2025 is going to be wild. That's my prediction, guys. So I think this stuff is all going to happen soon. But, it's always good to kind of keep an open mind and to think about different things. But if you see certain signs coming together, like what Jesus said, the leaves on the fig tree, if the fig tree represents Israel, we see the leaves on the fig tree, no fruit. We see the body coming together, no spirit. And Jesus said, I'm going to pour my spirit. And when's that going to happen? When he comes back physically and is King of the Jews, fulfilling the prophecy. All the prophecy, Yahweh's prophecy. I'm going to set my son, my king on Zion. Gabriel told Mary, Jesus is going to be Son of the Most High. He's going to reign over the descendants of Jacob forever. All this stuff is making sense, guys. So that's kind of some of my thoughts. But like I said, many Christians would disagree with me. They might have their reasons, I'm not sure. I think most of them don't read the Bible. In my experience, it's rare to meet a person who reads the Bible. But I could be wrong about these things, guys. So thank you for joining me in this discussion today. I want to ask you, what is your view on the eschaton? When do you think the eschaton is going to happen? Is it coming soon? What events are going to happen to let us know that it's near, according to your view? Are there some signs we can look to know it's coming near? I don't know, guys. Let me know your thoughts on eschatology. So anyway, guys, that's just a few of my thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode. As always, I love you very much. Hope you're doing great, guys. And as always, I'll see you over in the next episode of Mark's Bible Overview. Take care.